Coming at you live from the future. What's up, gang? What's up, special beings? Toast, toast, toast. Gonna get started in a minute here. That was Rooks G with Altered Self. Tonight we're talking about CIA mind control, poisoner in chief, Sidney Gottlieb, and the search for mind control. Let's give it one more from Rooks G. This is Once and For All. Let's go. Make sure that you smash like, share the stream, support whatever way you can. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the memberships. You can purchase a membership. You can ask me questions via Super Chat and also via the links provided. Let's go. Midweek. Here we go. Let's talk about the heavy stuff tonight. Kick it off with Rooks G here. As usual. We're doing it live. We're doing it live. We're doing it live. All right, we'll do it live. Fucking thing sucks. Yeah, let's get after it. Let's keep living. Special beings, shout out. Let's kick it on nods. Let's get going. Here we go. Come on. That's right, let's get after it. That's right, here we go. Cheers. What's up, y'all? What's up, gang? Let's get after it. Yo, what's up, gang? Let's get after it. All right. We're here. Get used to it. What's up, gang? Tonight we're covering Sidney Gottlieb and the search for CIA mind control. This is a 2019 book that it took me a while to get around to. I remember when it came out, and I finally got around to getting it, and I was not disappointed. This book and John Mark's The Search for the Manchurian Candidate book, and a bunch of these books go together. John Prados, the book on Alan Dulles, all go pretty nicely together. Of course, John Marks co-wrote the Victor Marchetti book, but this one is particularly breezy, and the subject matter is so serious and so dark that we'll probably take the opposite tone tonight, just because, so we can get through it. This is not our usual fare. I mean, usually we cover, of course, literature and film, but I thought that it would be worth it to cover this book because mind control plays such a heavy role in the analyses that I've done, and it really provides a template for so many of the works of fiction, and especially films that we've done. I mean, so many. You know, our template for looking at literature and film, especially 20th century fiction, tends to be, we tend to have a few things. We have the Gnostic paradigm, we have the most dangerous game motif, and then we have mind control and dissociation. And so what better way to look at that than to look at the actual events of the 20th century in the OSS and CIA through the lens of Stephen Kinzer's book here about Sidney Gottlieb. And I think this one is really came at the right time in terms of publication. At least it did in terms of my own, you know, my own journey into whatever. I don't know. I mean, when the book was published, I was pretty heavy into looking into. I mean, I would print out Phoenix program documents. That's because it's my own book that I'm writing, and it really does fit pretty nicely into this. But I remember when the book was published. I mean, I was really looking into. I mean, we're all looking into things. We're all noticers here, and I was really looking into, especially Sidney Gottlieb, because he plays such a heavy phantom role in a lot of the papers and documentation about mind control, and especially about Monarch and about MK Ultra sub-projects, MK Ultra in general. And so then the book was published, and then I didn't get the book, and I finally got around to getting it, but that's because I'd already gone, like everybody else, further into everything. And the book's interesting because I think it has the first published picture of Sidney Gottlieb, for one, and it talks about his own life. So Stephen Kinzer managed to find things about his own life and where he lived. All I knew at the time was that Gottlieb had died and that he had lived in some sort of a yurt in Northern Virginia. He lived off-grid in Northern Virginia, outside of Langley, outside of CIA territory, and that he was into yoga and goat farming. That's like all that anybody really knew about him, I think. And so then we have this book, which he was given the photograph of Gottlieb by the CIA. He reached out, and just kind of like John Marks reaching out. You know, you forget that John Marks published his book on the search for the Manchurian Candidate by getting a FOIA request in the 70s. And they sent him a bunch of documents, which he then got, I guess, graduate students to help him with. And that ended up setting the theme for a lot of research into CIA and mind control. But the book also talks about interviews with CIA people. That it talks about when the movie Manchurian Candidate came out and how that affected their own programs and whatnot. And this is what I was talking about in the member stream today. Member stream, grab a membership if you want to get a members only stream. I was talking about the movie Apocalypto, Based Mel's Apocalypto, and how it becomes more and more apparent in my own life just how much art influences real life, and how there is a synergy involved between the two. This weird sort of synchro that occurs in times and places. Kind of like the weird things about how, like, we did the thing on Base Mel's flight risk movie, and then all of the stuff happens with real flight risks. And that happens, name the subject, that always happens with our people, and that's bound to occur. But it's interesting to read about Sidney Gottlieb and these early CIA people, especially the mind control people, because most of them are characters who come from upper class families. We think of like the Skull and Bones type and upper class families, and they go to various boarding schools, and we're Yale people, Harvard people, a lot of Yale people, and they end up in espionage. And this is because of a lot of this is due to World War II with the OSS and the Old Boy Network. So the Old Boy Network really does provide a precedent for these characters to be able to move about the world and their circles. And espionage is sort of perfect for that. But we do have with Sidney Gottlieb a character who's the exact opposite. Gottlieb is a guy who's born of German stock, and German and that place stock, and an immigrant family, and then is a sort of a child genius, but he is really a Richard III character in the 20th century, mixed in with sort of a medieval poisoner because of his club foot. He has a club foot, and he has a stammer, and tries to get into the war, but is rejected. And then ends up being a scientist, and makes his way into CIA, into OSS, and then CIA. And really is Stephen Kinzer's point with this is that he posits that the Gottlieb is probably the most influential unknown person of the 20th century. I agree with him. I think that's a good assessment of a dark character. And the reason is because the lens of espionage and intelligence in the 20th century, especially through the Western powers, like he provides a kind of focal point, like a laser point for all of these characters. They all end up filtering through him because of what he provides them as far as assassinations go. And I think the way to think about this guy, I know everybody in here probably knows who Sidney Gottlieb is, and so I'm just trying to provide you some insights or give you what he says, what Kinzer says in this book. But what he really says is that he's a dark kind of medieval poisoner, and he is the assassination specialist. And I like to think of him as like the dark. I mean, if you think of Q in the Bond movies, that's this guy, but with sweeping broad powers. And it's not just gadgets. It's not just special activities division and making gadgets and poison pens, but actually most probably writing the assassination manual from the early 50s. And then finally, the KUBARK manual for enhanced interrogation in various countries that is then pulled out of a drawer, dusted off, and then used again by, what's his name, James Mitchell, is that the psychologist for the War on Terror? I think that there's a direct line with this guy. And Kinzer even says in one interview that he talked to a former CIA director from the past couple decades, and ran it by him that he was writing a book on this guy, and he said, "Yeah, who are you writing about?" He said, "Sidney Gottlieb," and he said, "Who's that?" Exactly. So in the end, it's pretty interesting because even in the end, when he was going to put the picture of him on the cover of the book, this is what he looks like as a young man, right here, and then here he is as an older guy. Here's Frank Olson. You remember Frank Olson? Right here's Frank Olson right there. This is the LSD story, the so-called LSD story that we're going to get to. It's Frank Olson. And then here is a company picture of Sidney Gottlieb, and here he is with his lawyer. And those pictures were never seen before. There he is right there. They're never seen before. But then when they were going to put him on the cover of the book, they were like, yeah, but even when we put him on the cover of the book, nobody's going to recognize him from the cover. So instead, we'll just get this kind of spooky silhouette on the cover, and there he is. And that actually makes sense. It actually makes sense. Why would he be on the cover of the book? He's not on the cover of any book. He is... You remember he was played by, if you guys remember the Wormwood documentary, that also came out in 2017, Errol Morris's Wormwood documentary about Frank Olson, and he was played by Tim Blake Nelson. And Tim Blake Nelson actually, according to the reading of this book, really does play a fairly closer version to Sidney Gottlieb than any other depictions. I mean, people just didn't know who he was, but he's the guy. So... yeah, Sabrina says Olson's son has been trying to clear his pop. Yeah, that's part of what we've read here. Now, I like the book because, first of all, it starts off with an epigraph from Shakespeare, of course, and that makes sense when you study Gottlieb. Gottlieb is a sort of amalgamation. There's a plane flying like very low over me right now. That's crazy. That's crazy. I'm not just being schizo. That's a plane flying extremely low right over the house. It's also really bad outside, and the roads are complete chaos, which is crazy. If you live in the South and it snows, it's always like that. But I mean, it is like total chaos outside. But when you hear that sound whistling right above you, and I'm not just talking right above you, like right above you, that's pretty crazy because the airport's not. Anyway, whatever. But yeah, it begins with a quote from Shakespeare from Julius Caesar, Act 2. I think it's Act 2, Scene 1. This is Ligarius and Brutus speaking. And I can't tell you how, when I opened the book and saw this, I knew I'd made the right choice with the book because I'll bust out the copy of the very first chapter. So this book begins, Ligarius and Brutus. Ligarius says, "What's to do?" Brutus says, "A piece of work that will make sick men whole." Ligarius, "But are not some whole that we must make sick?" And Brutus says, "That must we also." My own book begins with Brutus and Cassius. Brutus says, "No, Cassius, for the eye sees not itself, but by reflection, by some other things." And Cassius says, "'Tis just, and it is very much lamented, Brutus, that you have no such mirrors as will turn your hidden worthiness into your eye, that you might see your shadow." And it's particularly apt that the epigraph is from Julius Caesar, because one of the things and I have just been teaching Julius Caesar for the millionth time, and I just rewatched the Brando film. And one of the things about Julius Caesar that Shakespeare does so well is he makes it rife with ambiguity that is both purposeful and accidental. And so we can read the play millions of times and never walk away knowing who is the good guy and who is the bad guy, according to their own lives. I tend to think with Julius Caesar, just as a little tangent here, that no matter what, it doesn't matter Brutus's intentions, Brutus and Cassius both walk away killing a guy that they know, and they stab him in the back. They stab him, dozens of times, and they kill him. And it's a kind of precog event where they kill him according to what they think he's going to do. But as Mark Antony points out, I 3 times offered him the kingly crown, which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition? Right? In other words, all of the hallmarks of the things that he might have done to be a tyrant, he refused. And maybe in the end, it ends up being somewhere in the realm of Julius Caesar knows he's going to be assassinated and welcomes it. But regardless, the palace intrigue that occurs with Brutus, Cassius, Casca, and all of these characters ambushing Caesar in the Senate house and then walking outside and then talking to the people as if they're going to understand, and flipping the plebs back and forth between they start off loving Caesar, then they're glad that he has been assassinated, then they love him again, then they're glad that he's gone, and then they love him again, and then they tear down the city, and then there's another civil war, then there's another civil war, and then finally out of all of that fire and tempest we get Octavian, who becomes Augustus. And it's fitting that the that the epigraph for this book is from Caesar because of the nature of deniability that occurs within the ranks of CIA, especially through the circles within circles. Right? It's almost Dune World and medieval Richard III, a bit of Hamlet thrown in there, and a lot of Macbeth, and some Titus Andronicus, all thrown into one world that occurs in the 20th century. So we actually begin the book by talking about, after basically the foreword, talking about his Kinzer's own research into Gottlieb and CIA, into the precursors for this, which are the sea camps in the 20th century in that country, in Europe. And what you get here is much, I think much more in depth than any of the books that I've read prior. I've read biographies of Mengele and Theodore Morel and all of these characters, especially ones dealing with the sea camps. And this one, I'm actually about to do an analysis on this work of fiction, Martin Amis's Zone of Interest, which I covered the movie a little while ago, but this one is a work of fiction dealing with that. And what you get from this is that that although Mengele sets the precedent with trauma bonding and with forming a kind of rudimentary and horrible mind control, the book is actually much more focused on other characters, especially the ones who were paperclipped. Remember that Mengele ended up in South America and escaped all this. Klaus Barbie also escaped. I've covered HHHH, right? The book on Heydrich, which also dealt with some of these characters. But Klaus Barbie also escaped. The Butcher of Lyon escaped, but ended up in CIA employ anyway. And then here we have Kurt Blom, which is, this says, among those who designed drug combinations and special interrogation techniques for use on prisoners at Villa Schuster was Kurt Blom, who had directed the let's say, what word can we use? The Hotlers, who had directed the Hotlers biowarfare program. He and Gottlieb searched for ways to wipe away human mind so a new one could be implanted in its place. We also have Ishii and Ishii the Killer from Unit 731 in Japan, who knew each other. Did you know that they knew each other? So let me skip here to page 17, which is, I wrote my argument that the Bio-W people make is a reversal of all morals. Morality is totally reversed, and they had no grounding at all. So here's what we say. Here's what it says on pages 16 and 17. By accepting this job, Baldwin became America's first bio-warrior. He had the intellectual and academic qualifications to take on such a pioneering role. By personal background, though, he was an unlikely candidate. His grandfather had been a Methodist preacher. He was a part-time pastor himself. He held Quaker beliefs. He grew up abhorring all forms of violence and lived austerely. After the United States entered World War II, though, he proved as ready to join its cause as any American. Here's what he says. To understand the bio-dub program, you do need to understand the climate in which we existed, he told an interviewer years later. It never occurred to me to say, I don't want to do this. Everybody was doing whatever he was asked to do. There's no question that the idea of using biological agents to kill people represented a complete shift of thinking, but it only took me about 24 hours to think my way through it. After all, the immorality of war is war itself. You start out with the idea in war of killing people, and that to me is the immoral part of it. But I grew up first in medical bacteriology, and you spent your time trying to kill microorganisms to prevent them from causing disease. Now, to turn around and think of it as I had to was horrifying to some extent. Yes, no question about it. And he remained a civilian during the 2.5 years he spent establishing and running America's Bio-Dub program. His title was created for him, scientific director for the newly formed Army Bio-Dub Laboratories, part of the Chemical Warfare Service. And the Army gave him one of the most sweeping promises it made to any American during World War II. Whatever you ask, we'll provide for it. If I said, I want that man, Baldwin later said, unless the Manhattan Project said they needed him, I got him. And this says, On page 15, the assembled scientists explained to their military hosts why fabricating toxins on this scale would be prohibitively difficult or impossible. One dissented, Ira Baldwin, the bacteriologist who had been Sidney Gottlieb's mentor at the University of Wisconsin, said he saw no theoretical or technical barrier to the construction of such a chamber. But here we end up with Baldwin, who was his mentor, and they end up buying this this property. First, they looked at all these properties for where to put this thing, and they ended up with, they surveyed and rejected a former shoe factory near Edgewood Arsenal, a weather station, Mount Weather in Virginia, and a Sugarloaf Mountain in Maryland. Finally, outside the Maryland town of Frederick, they found a former National Guard air base called Dietrich Field, named after an Army surgeon who had lived nearby and served in World War I. So then we get Fort Detrick. Airplanes based at Dietrich Field had been moved to Europe. What remained were empty barracks, a cavernous hangar, runways, and a control tower outside the gate. Pastures stretched toward this mountain, a majestic Appalachian ridge in which the presidential retreat Shangri-La, now called Camp David, was nestled. Washington is 50 miles away. This 1,000-acre base would become the literal nerve center of the U.S. government's search for ways to turn germs into weapons of war and covert action before World War I. And then we have the Office of Strategic Services, and they have a training base at Fort Detrick. And within 3 months, he had spent $4 million, and this is in the 40s. Everything Baldwin requisitioned was immediately supplied, from custom-made bacteriological equipment to bulk quantities of weapons to herds of laboratory animals, ultimately more than 500,000 white mice and tens of thousands of rats, rabbits, guinea pigs, sheep, monkeys, cats, ferrets, and canaries. And these guys even have like this little cadre. They make little songs about themselves. Early in 1944, Winston Churchill abruptly changed the bioweapons order he'd sent to President Roosevelt more than a year before, and he feared that the Hotlers might launch a last-ditch bioattack on Britain in a desperate attempt to turn the tide of war. Driven by this new sense of urgency, he asked Roosevelt to forget the time-consuming process of developing a new biodub and sent him something relatively easy to make, bomblets filled with anthrax spores. He wanted 500,000. And so they're off and running. One of the crazy things is that the pigeon experiments they did with anthrax were based at Horn Island off Mississippi, which is, right off the coast of, right in the Gulf, right near where my family lives, Horn Island, not far from Pass Christian and Gulfport. And these guys are crazy. First of all, they set off a nuclear weapon in Project Salmon in the underground salt mine in Mississippi, and then they do they start infecting pigeons with anthrax and setting them loose. At about the same time, Reinhard Gehlen becomes the boss of West German intelligence. He's paperclipped, and the CIA or the OSS ends up subverting Roosevelt's order for the whole thing, which is crazy. Roosevelt actually orders that he orders that, let's see. Donovan asked Roosevelt for a mandate, and Roosevelt says the carrying out of such guarantees would be difficult and probably be widely misunderstood both in this country and abroad. We may expect that the number of Germans who are anxious to save their skins and property will rapidly increase. Among them may be some who should probably be tried for war crimes or at least arrested for active participation in Hotler activities. Even with the necessary controls you mentioned, I'm not prepared to authorize giving you the guarantees. This is for a paperclip, which they then just completely ignore. They just completely ignore and subvert because they realize they have to get a bunch of these guys for the programs for which they are authorizing themselves, which is insane. But their thought, okay, look, one of the things that there are two motifs that sort of guide this whole thinking of the entire process. One is the forethought and one is the afterthought. The forethought is that the enemy is going to probably do these things because we're projecting on them or because we may have intelligence or it may be doctrine intelligence, and they're going to use them. So therefore, we have to be prepared for them by having them also. So the Allies do this both with the Hotlers and with the Soviets. And then the afterthought is that when these things come up later, fast forward to the church hearings and so forth in the 70s, they say, we can't put people like Gottlieb on trial because, first of all, it's too unbelievable for people to be able to accept. And also because you have no idea what it took to hold the sanctity of human life in your hand and to protect it at all costs. But at all costs ends up meaning that they're going to destroy human life to save human life. Now that that sort of argument seems to be fine for neocons, but it doesn't seem to be fine for the poor victims of this thing. And what ends up happening is that everything that the Hotler people do, they do that and more. And it becomes way, way worse, especially in light of the fact that their whole mandate is supposed to be that the other side might be doing this, so we're going to do it worse. Also, you run into all these things in the book, all these times where you have a doctor who is contacted later by CIA and who says something like, I was a doctor, and my whole purpose was to do no harm. I was tasked with protecting human lives from bacteriological attacks, based on synthetic or natural causes, organic causes. And so we were supposed to be, we were protecting human lives from that. But then I was contacted by the CIA, and they wanted me to take out this guy. So then I joined, and I told my unit, let's just do the total opposite. Everything that we were working on, we're going to flip it and do the opposite. So instead of do no harm, we're going to do a lot of harm. We're going to do the most harm possible. And it only takes, in the book, it makes it seem like it only takes an appeal to patriotism for them to do that. Now, of course, they have monetary incentives, but they also, what's crazy is that when Kinzer gets down to it, he really, in my opinion, shows that a lot of these guys are just waiting for the chance they want to possess another person. And that really is that's one of the major motifs in this book, especially with regard to Gottlieb himself. So my sort of thesis with Gottlieb is that, if you can call it that, is that Gottlieb represents any time that a person is referred to as spiritual, not religious, in that old sort of meme, Gottlieb is their guy. This is the point in extremis. This is the end point of that character, because it shows that it's not spiritual righteousness or virtue. It's simply spiritual possession and passion slave. In other words, there's no morality guiding these people other than a kind of made-up morality or a kind of appeal to patriotism, which falls apart once you include the fact that they are doing this to their own people. But it's the fact that this guy is such a chicken neck ninny. He's such a pot-bellied goblin. This guy's living on a yurt farm, milking goats and eating, drinking yogurt from the goat teat. That he's a sweet guy. He's very nice. But he wants to get you into a psychiatric therapy group so that then he can refer you to you and Cameron, and he can psychic drive you for months until you regress into infancy. You lose all bodily functions, and you've had the message "Mommy hates me" played on a football helmet with unmovable headphones for 8 years, until you are a total babbling, mind-controlled slave. That's what he means by spiritual. He wants to know what it's like to possess other people. That really is what I get from this, as far as this guy goes. I mean, and there's a lot to substantiate in that in the book. Let's talk about Ishi the Killer, because a lot of these people are paper-clipped. We have, of course, Kurt Blum, who's the head of the bio-dub program for the Hotlers. and who is paperclipped. He ends up being, this guy ends up going into the docks and the stocks. He's in docks and stocks with Goering, and when Goering when Goering unalives himself with the cyanide, bites down on the cyanide. I remember Goering was at Nuremberg, and he was he had been suffering from, I've got all the older books up there and all that stuff on Goering being essentially a morphine addict. Goering became a morphine addict because when he was shot down as a fighter ace in World War I and his injuries. It's very similar to Howard Hughes. And what's the drug they were all on? They synthesized Dolafine. I know that Dolafine was named for Hitler, and that ends up being methadone. But what's the other one that they ended up injecting? There's the tank drug, amphetamine, and then there's the opiate that they made. I'm gonna have to look it up because I can't keep going without knowing that. Let's see. This is the Pervitin. Pervitin is the amphetamine. Methadone is listed right here, but there's another Eucadol. That's what it's called. I just remember it. Eucadol. Eucadol is what Goering was addicted to. He ends up losing all this weight when he's in the docks, and then he ends up being slipped a cyanide capsule and then unaliving himself. Interestingly enough, we have a family friend who was one of the U.S. Army guards when he was there. I think he had 2 guards, American U.S. GIs, and one of them was a family friend that we have. But anyway, what was I talking about with Goering? So this guy, Kurt Blum ends up getting basically helped by OSS so that he can get out of being tried and convicted and hanged at the Nuremberg trials. Hanged, not hung. Hanged is a person. Hung is an object. So what happens is he is slipped a copy of Time Magazine, Henry Luce Time Magazine, which includes articles on it about the was it polio? I think it was the polio trials on humans that Americans had done. So he uses that in his defense. And anyway, a bunch of them are hanged, a bunch of them are convicted, and he is let go. And when he's let go, the problem is then how to get him to the United States to be part of Paperclip. Well, he eventually gets put in charge of this facility in Germany. And then the problem becomes, how do we get Ishii the killer to also be part of this? Ishii is the guy who was in charge of Unit 731 in Japan, which I'm about to talk about. And I think that MacArthur signed off on this. MacArthur had sweeping powers in Japan as the new governor, war governor of Japan. And so he pretty much signed off on it. This says that in the months after Japan surrendered to Allied forces on August 15, 1945, several captured Japanese officers told American interrogators that Japan had maintained a secret germ warfare program. They mentioned rumors that poisons had been tested on human subjects at a base called Unit 731 in the occupied Chinese region of Manchuria. Reports of these interrogations were forwarded to the bio-warfare laboratories at Camp Dietrich. Scientists there, already excited by the prospect of data from Kurt Blum and other doctors who had served the Nazis, pressed for more. They discovered that the army surgeon who ran Unit 731 was a general named Shiro Ishii, and asked the Counterintelligence Corps to find him just as it had found Blum in Germany. Their plan was the same, to keep him out of Soviet hands and then secure his loyalty by saving him from the gallows. 2 obsessions, the extremes of Japanese nationalism and the extremes of medicine, shaped Shiro Ishii. He came from a family of rich landowners and was an outstanding medical student at Kyoto Imperial University. During the late 1920s, he became fascinated with the Geneva Protocol that bans bio-dub Japan, like the United States, had refused to sign it. This meant, by Ishii's reckoning, that it had every right to develop weapons that others could not, and that those weapons could be decisive in future war. He saw this as his way to contribute to his country's greater glory. After finishing medical school, he went on to form what's called Unit 731, or this was the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Bureau. They raised a bunch of villages in order to form this. Yeah, Sherm warfare. Thank you. Sherm warfare. I didn't know you like to get wet, though. Sherm. Dust. Big Dipper. You be riding the Big Dipper. Ooh wee. Ooh wee. I didn't know you like to ride the Big Dipper. Listen to this paragraph. This is page 23 of the book. No, 25. Our God-given mission as doctors is to challenge all forms of disease-causing microorganisms, blocking all paths for their intrusion into the body, annihilate foreign matter residents in our bodies, and devise the best possible treatments. Ishii told his men as they began the work, the research work on which we are now to embark is the complete opposite of those principles. So they began sweeping up bandits and what they called undesirables from the countryside, and they started using them, testing on them. And these things were absolute. I can't even read to you what they did here, but everybody knows about Shiroichi. But I can't even read to you most of what they did here. It's absolutely stomach churning. They spun people in centrifuges. They were infected with anthrax, syphilis, plague, cholera, and other diseases. They gave them hypothermia, death by gangrene. They tied up people on posts and then shot exploded anthrax bombs and made them spread their cheeks to see how far it could, just all sorts of just totally demonic, demented stuff. Poison chocolate gum, chewing gum, chocolate and chewing. What's chocolate gum? That's nasty. Hairpins, fountain pens, plague-infested fleas, anthrax and bomb casing, just every single possible thing you could do. And then they formed it all in what he called logs, and that he ordered his men, they had to take it to the grave. And he eventually, when the Allies came, he tried to blow everything up and destroy all the evidence. He insisted that Unit 731 had not spread, vague plyrus in China, and that its experiments with toxins were performed only on lab animals. But he clearly thinks of the people as animals, lab animals. And then eventually, when they contact him, he says, if you give me documentary immunity for myself, superiors, and subordinates, I can get all the information you want. I would like to be hired by the U.S. government as a biosherm expert. And they're like, okay, sounds good. We just can't let anybody know about it. The next step was to apply this principle to Ishii and his comrades. General MacArthur had to move quickly because the International Military Tribunal for the Far East was about to open its trial. So he signs a secret decree granting amnesty to Ishii and all who'd worked with him at 731. Statements from Ishii, MacArthur reasoned, can probably be obtained by informing Japanese involved that information will be retained in intelligence channels and will not be employed as core Wimes evidence. So that's it. And it also turns out that Blom and Ishii they already knew each other. I mean, they were both Axis, and they both were doing the same thing, so I guess it, speaks to reason that they would know each other, but they were like pen pals. Hey, what'd you do today? No, nothing. We did some things, man, and some stuff. Yeah, it was real bad. Just awful. So this says on page 31, for a core of Americans who served in the military and intelligence agencies during World War II, the war never really ended. All that changed was the enemy. The role once played by Hotlers and Imperial Japan was assumed by the Soviet Union and after 1949, Red China. In the new narrative, monolithic communism directed from the Kremlin was a demonic force that mortally threatened the United States and all humanity. With the stakes so existentially high, no sacrifice in the fight against communism of money, morality, or human life could be considered excessive. This conviction, unspoken but almost universally shared in Washington, came to undergird and justify one of the most bizarre covert projects ever launched by the government. And this is when, in 1945, Truman decided that OSS should end and there should be no intelligence apparatus because the war was over. But then in 1947, he reverses everything and does the National Security Act, and then the CIA is formed. And that pretty much sets the stage. The CIA's first covert operations were in Europe, where the Cold War was most intense. In 1947, its officers hired Corsican gangsters to break a communist-led strike at the port of Marseille. The next year, it ran a successful campaign to prevent communists from winning a national election in Italy as Gladio. It sent spies, saboteurs, and commando squads into the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. These were bold operations, but similar to others in secret services have been carrying out for generations. Then a sudden shock from Budapest gave the CIA and scientists at Fort Detrick, Camp Detrick then, a new fear that set them on a new course. The Roman Catholic prelate of Hungary, Cardinal Joseph Minzinci, appeared at a show trial and confessed to extravagant charges of attempting to overthrow the government, directing black market currency schemes, and seeking to steal the royal crown as part of a plot to reestablish the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Leaders of Western countries were outraged. President Truman denounced the trial as infamous. Pope Pius XII called it a serious outrage which inflicts a deep wound and excommunicated all Catholics involved, and CIA officers reacted differently. They focused on the way Minzinci had behaved during the trial. He appeared disoriented, spoke in a flat monotone, and confessed to crimes he had clearly not committed. Clearly he had been coerced, but how? So this, along with the Korean War, is what ends up really establishing MK Ultra. First, we have, of course, Bluebird. The way the timeline goes with the projects is it goes Bluebird to Artichoke, because I know that people, there's so many names, it's easy to forget a lot of this stuff and to get mixed up. But just for the sake of review, it goes Bluebird, Artichoke, MK Ultra, and then we have MH Chaos. MH Chaos is the global program, a worldwide program. MH means the dicryptic, which means worldwide. MK is supposedly mind control. Bluebird, as part of Bluebird, we had Mk-Naomi and Operation Paperclip. As part of Artichoke, we had mind control, heroin, cocaine trafficking, and use of heroin and cocaine in trying to establish mind control, along with all the other drugs, which they finally realized that we're just giving guys drugs. So now we got to look for something else, and then LSD comes into play, lysergic acid, diethylamide, and then the biowarfare and torture program of MK Ultra is where we get George Hunter White, Midnight Climax, Camp X, and then we get the sub-projects, and the sub-projects are what John Marks goes into. The sub-projects were determined by Sidney Gottlieb, and there are like 140, I think there are 149 sub-projects, and those deal with everything from MK Delta, Winter Soldier, Programmed Assassins, to the Felix Springmeier classification of Alpha through Epsilon. I think Epsilon is the through Omega. MK Omega is the self-destruct program. MK Beta, of course, is the Felix Springmeier Beta, MK Beta sex kitten. And then we have Monarch, Candy Jones programs, etc. But we also have MK Often, which is one of the name changes later, and that also it deals with the occult and Sybil Leak, and this is when we get this psychosexual territory brought into this, which is really crazy. But check this out. This is really important for now. So one of the things that's happening now with the fog, you've heard about these cities like draped in fog. They've done a couple of, at least people say they've done some analyses of the air, and they've come up with this chemical called Serrata. And this is actually the same thing that happened under Mk-Naomi. This says, and this is all confirmed now. So it says they were studying botulin and a bunch of and shellfish toxins, and then This says, besides working in the laboratories at Camp Dietrich, scientists assigned to Mk-Naomi carried out field tests to learn how biological agents might work in crowded environments. Some observed biodubs tests conducted by the British military, including one near the Caribbean island of Antigua in 1949, during which hundreds of animals died. That same year, 6 members of the Special Operations Division entered the Pentagon pretending to be air quality monitors and sprayed mock bacteria into air ducts. Afterward, they calculated if their attack had been real, at least half of those working the building would have died. Since some of the scientists were researching biodubs, how to wage it and how to defend against it, they wanted to learn how pathogens could be spread in concentrated population and what the effects of such an attack would be. In 1950, they carried out a large-scale outdoor test in which harmless but traceable germs would be released into the air of a large American city. They chose San Francisco, not only because it had a coastline and tall buildings, but also because its chronic fog would disguise germ clouds. The U.S. Navy supplied a minesweeper specially equipped with large aerosol hoses. Operation SeaSpray, as it was called, was classified as a military maneuver. Local officials were not notified. For 6 days at the end of September, as their minesweeper drifted near San Francisco, scientists from Camp Dietrich directed the spraying of a bacteria called Serratia Marcescens, I don't know science, into the coastal mist. They had chosen this substance because it had a red tint, making it easy to trace and was not known to cause any ill effects. According to samples taken afterward at 43 sites, the spraying reached all of San Francisco's 800,000 residents and also affected people in Oakland, Berkeley, Sausalito, and 5 other cities. Over the next couple of weeks, 11 people checked into a hospital with UTIs and were found to have red drops inside them. One of them, who was recovering from prostate surgery, died. Unfortunately, doctors were mystified. Several of them later published a journal article reporting this curious clinical observation for which they could find no explanation. This was deemed a vulnerability test, and it was a success. It was noted that a successful BW attack on this area can be launched from the sea, and that effective dosages can be produced over relatively large areas. So it's like, oh yeah. So we're gonna spray sriracha. We're gonna put sriracha in the damn tremcales coming from the fucking Boss Hog boat out there. We're just gonna spray that shit, and we're gonna determine that, you know, if this were an attack, which it is, then this would be deadly, which it is. So I guess we win. You sure about that? Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? Then we get into this stuff is crazy. Then we get into Bluebird. Bluebird. Let's see. 1950, a new CIA Director General Walter Battle Smith took over. One of his first decisions was to hire the ambitious former OSS spy master Alan Dulles. There we go. Although Dulles was in many ways a limited thinker, I like how he throws that in there. That's Kinzer likes to. I like how Kinzer throws that in. That's a great little dig at Dulles in there. He liked to imagine himself on the cutting edge of espionage. During his war years in Switzerland, he had met and come to admire the psychoanalyst Carl Jung. By the time he began his long career at the CIA, he became fascinated with the prospect that science could discover ways to manipulate the human psyche. Remember that Dulles. Did Dulles go to La Rosie? No, Richard Helms went to La Rosie, where the Strokes went to school, the CIA boarding school. That's where Julian Casablancas and Albert Hammond went. I actually applied to be a teacher there. I worked at a boarding school one year, and I went to prep school, so it's kind of in line with it. But I thought, what the hell? Let me try to see if I can work at this at the Kim Jong-un CIA boarding school. it's a prep school, but it's where a lot of these people went. William Carlos Williams went there as well. Talked about that. La Rosie, look it up. ROSEY. Yeah, I know you guys don't need to look it up. You already did. You already know all about this. Hey, listen, speaking of people who already know about this, I know you know all about this stream. Why don't you please, if you can, smash that like if you haven't already. Share the stream. Grab a membership. Send me a super chat if you got a question about anything with this book or any other book. And also, you can support me at the links provided because I'm trying to get ready for my big trip. because I'm basically, I think, already on holiday because, you know, it snowed so bad here. So I'd probably get out of here if I could. But I got another week to go. And so help me to fund my big trip. I'm going down south. Got to go down south, drive 1,000 miles to go see the fam. So help me out with that. If you want to, I would appreciate that. If not, just send me a question. Send me a comment, whatever. Okay, so Dulles gets involved. Here is, let's see. I wrote at the top of this page, heroin. 77007 European Command Intelligence Center. Let's see, Camp Wing, murder. Oh, Manchurian Candidate. That's what I wrote. Okay. So, this is a juicy part of the book. In a sleepy German town called Oberursel, I don't know what that is. Oberursel, tucked into rolling hills north of Frankfurt. I've been to Frankfurt. Frankfurt on Main. That's what it's called. The Nazis had operated a transit camp for captured British and American pilots. The U.S. Army took it over in 1946, named it Camp King. Not Camp King like we know it. This is Camp Lawrence King. After an intelligence officer had been killed a couple of years before, since it was already configured with prison cells and interrogation rooms, it became the place where recalcitrant hotlers and other prisoners were sent for special interrogation. They're talking about werewolves, the werewolf division. Officially, it was said to house the 7707th European Command Intelligence Center. That was not the whole story. This is not a good place. This is the worst place in the world, and you don't even know it yet. The place you do not want to get sent out of all. I mean, you don't want to get sent to a gulag after World War II. You don't want that. But the place you really don't want to be is, Kristen says Camp King is the FEMA region I'll be sent to. You want to be sent, Kristen, you want to be sent to Camp Kang in the Outlands Acid Rain District, FEMA Zone 322. This is Zone ZGZ, Zone Ground Zero, the worst damn place in the world. And Camp King was home for the Rough Boys, a handful of counterintelligence corps officers known for bruising prisoners. Some of their methods were traditional, like immersing victims in freezing water or forcing them to run through gauntlets of soldiers who beat them with baseball bats and other weapons. Others were pharmacological. They used mescaline, heroin, amphetamine. Victims' screams sometimes echoed through the base. The unit took great pride in their nicknames, the Rough Boys and the Kraut Gauntlet, and didn't hold back with any drug or technique. You name it, they used it, says this counterintelligence corps leader. I mean, probably because they were all on it, too. They're like, look, are you one of them rough boys? I want to be sent to Camp Kang so I can get that dog food. They get sent to Camp Kang, they get some free dog food and some white girl, and then they get to just wreak havoc on these people with their the electrical cord on their iron. Doing whatever they want, just horrible, just horrible, just real, these guys were real jerks. Of course. Yes, Greg, we do have to use all kinds of code here. Even though we're talking about a historical document and we're talking about a historical book and it's all in this stuff, we still got to censor this stuff. It's too spicy. Things are getting too spicy for the pepper. The Rough Boys at Camp King gave Alan Dulles all the muscle he needed for torture of the traditional sort. Most appealingly, as one CI officer in Frankfurt put it, disposal of body would be no problem. Quote, end quote. Dulles, though, was looking beyond traditional methods of interrogation. He resolved to take advantage of Camp King's assets, but in a way that would allow him to test forms of persuasion more sophisticated than what the Rough Boys doled out. Rather than rely on the thuggish Rough Boys, it's the thuggish, ruggish bone. It's the thuggish, ruggish bone. It's the thuggish, ruggish bone. It's the man rump step up. Okay. Standing on the corner, straight slanging rocks. Oh shit, here comes a motherfucking cop. So I dash, I duck, Santa hides behind a tree, making sure them motherfuckers don't see me. Hell yeah, I dust them. Police on my drawers, I had to pause, and yeah, it's still motherfucker. Now my game is tight, tight as fuck. Is my game easy, motherfucking E or Eric, right? It's all the same now. Might hit at how I stacks my grip, I got to have it, bitch. For the love of the shit, motherfucker. That was their anthem. Rather than rely on the thuggish rough boys, the CIA began sending Bluebird teams to Camp King to carry out interrogations. Then it went a step further. Oh boy, here we go. Bluebird work was so secret that even a secure army base was not secure enough. Lay back in the cut like I told your ass. Give me the microphone and let me hit you with a pass. I got a little cousin by the name of Daz, and bitches who fucking give me the ass. Now I know I'm about to sit there. I don't know. I do when I'm on the mic because Snoop Dogg is trying to like the surgeon, the doctor, Drizzy. Okay. Fly human being seeing, no, I'm not European being all I can. When I put the motherfucking mic in my hand, and you don't want to step because I get away. Follow me. Listen to me because I do you like you want to be done, Stu. Okay. So bad. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Look, we got to inject a little bit of fun in this because this shit gets dark. It gets real dork. Bluebird work was so secret that even a secure army base was not secure enough. Is that why they named it Twitter? Because of Bluebird? No, they named it Twitter because a bird's sound is a tweet and because the original messaging was with a pigeon. That makes sense. But also, Bluebird probably fits into it somewhere. Some sort of an intelligence operation, right? Has to be. The CIA would open its own secret prison where captured enemy agents would be used as subjects in mind control experiments. It would be under the formal control of Camp King, but located outside the base perimeter and run by the CIA. To put it another way, a CIA safe house under the protection of the U.S. Army. This is a terrible place, you guys. This was the first CIA black site. Hey, shouts out to JW right there. He says, cool stream. Thank you. Thank you, cool sir. Really appreciate it. Thank you for that $20 super chat. Cheers to you. This place is terrible. From the outset, Villa Schuster, known as House Waldorf, after the name of the lane that leads to it, looks almost regal, a calm survivor of history's tempests. It's spacious, with an elegant entryway and sturdy beams. The grand living room has a high ceiling, leaded windows, and an imposing fireplace. On the two upper floors are a dozen bedrooms. The basement is a complex of bricked-in storerooms, easily configured as sealed cells. Oh boy, that's not where you want to end up. And you know, this place still exists, and now it's I think it's an apartment complex. A guy bought it and made it into a mansion. Then it was made into Elon says, Ice Cube. Yeah. Last week, fucked around and got a triple-double. Ice Cube got a triple-double. Okay. So this place is pretty bad. And now it's apartment complexes. And they have, like, the laundry rooms in the basement where people were getting tortured and they don't even know it. It's got to be haunted. This place has got to be haunted because, and I don't mean haunted by ghosts, but probably the psychic energy of the bad shit that was done there, the ghouls and goblins. You know, I mean, this is a terrible place. This says, with the coming of the Cold War in the 1940s, page 42, a different sort of prisoner began arriving at Camp King. Many were Eastern European, including from East Germany. Some were captured Soviet agents. Others claimed to be refugees, but had been judged unreliable. The guilty were mixed with the simply unfortunate. All were what the CIA called, quote, expendable, meaning that if they disappeared, no one would inquire too closely. The especially expendable, along with those believed to be guarding especially valuable secrets, were sent to Villa Schuster. In its basement, doctors and scientists conducted the most extreme experiments on human beings that had ever been carried out by officers of the United States government. This villa on the edge of Kronberg became the CIA's Trotter House, a German television documentary concluded decades later. CIA officers who were CIA officers who conducted Bluebird interrogations at Camp King and Villa Schuster counted on guidance from, quote, Doc Fisher, a German physician who had worked at Walter Reed General Hospital in Washington and spoke good English. Doc Fisher was General Walter Schreiber, the former Surgeon General of the Hitler Army. During the war, he had approved experiments at the various places I'm not going to name, injected them with mescaline and other drugs, and cut open so the progress of gangrene on their bodies could be monitored. According to one American researcher, the experiments usually resulted in slow, agonizing death. After the war, Schreiber was arrested by the Soviets and imprisoned at the notorious Lubyanka prison in Moscow. Finally, he persuaded his jailers to allow him to accept a professorship in East Berlin. Once there, he slipped across West Berlin and presented himself to officers of the Counterintelligence Corps. As soon as they confirmed his identity, they sent him to Camp King. There, he was welcomed like an admired colleague. Oh, yeah, we just do a little partying, smoke a little cigarette, eat a little chocolate. That's all I was doing, yeah. Yeah, why don't I come and work for you? That sounds very good. Yeah, we can go to Lebanon, and we can go to Las Deutschen Haus. We can go to La Villa Schuster. We dance around. That's it. We listen to a little FX Twin. This guy's horrible. But this is this is like really their first black site. And this is where they determined that CIA experiments with hypnosis, electroshock, and debilitating heat work towards their goal, according to one report, which was to induce violent cathartic reactions, alternately putting subjects to sleep, then waking them up until they were sufficiently confused to be coerced into reliving an experience from the past. And, of course, intensive polygraph work. As the pace of these experiments intensified, scientists at Camp Dietrich renewed their interest in Kurt Blom. Immediately after the war, they had declined his offer to come to the United States, but by the early 1950s, his knowledge of poisons and hallucinogens seemed to qualify him as an ideal advisor to the Bluebird Project. The CIA found him practicing medicine in Dortmund. On a spring day in 1951, an officer visited his office with a proposition. If he would agree to spill his secrets, the CIA would arrange for an accelerated paperclip contract that would bring him to the United States. Blum was enjoying his new life, but admitted that he liked the idea of a return to biological research. It seems enticing. Finally drawn, especially by the prospect of working once again with his former Hitler comrade, Walter Schreiber, who had accepted a paperclip contract and was at that moment preparing to board a ship to New York, he decided to accept the CIA's offer. He sold his medical practice, listed his home with a real estate broker, and pulled his children out of school so they could concentrate on learning English. Let's see. Okay, moving on. I'm going to move on from the rest of that guy's story. Let's see. Next page, I have mind control, aims, and questions. Okay, here's the list of what they want from a 1951 memo, and this is now enter James Jesus Angleton, Richard Helms, and Frank Wisner. It's the thuggish, ruggish bone. More murder, more mark, come again. Here we go. These would be of incredible value to the agency. Here's the list. Can accurate information be obtained from willing or unwilling individuals? Can agency personnel or persons of interest to this agency be conditioned to prevent any outside power from obtaining information from them by any known means? Can we guarantee total amnesia under any and all conditions? Can we alter a person's personality? How long will it hold? Can we devise a system for making unwilling subjects into willing agents? How can drugs best be concealed in a normal or commonplace item? Can we extract complicated formulas from scientists, engineers, if unwilling? Can we extract details of gun emplacements, landing fields, factories, mines, etc.? Can we also have them make detailed drawings, sketches, plans? Could any of this be done under field conditions in a very short space and time? Bluebird is not satisfied with the results, but believes with continued work and study, remarkable results can be obtained. And then we basically go into Artichoke work, and they start experimenting for a TD, what's called a truth drug. So the truth drug, man, it's hot in here too. Woo! It's hot in here. It gets hot with all this talk about Mk-Naomi and truth drugs. One of Gottlieb's new associates on page 60 is listed as Harold Abramson. This guy is a total creep. He's one of the creepiest people. He is, when you think of Monarch and Stranger Things territory, especially involving, let's say, unwitting Agent 11, that's Harold Abramson. That's the kind of guy he is. A total ogre, a ghoul. So he becomes one of Gottlieb's confidants and one of his right-hand men. Then we go into the truth serum hunt, and I can kind of gloss over that because I know a lot of people know all that already. That's pretty obvious. One of the major points of the book, and what I really like about this, is that the book makes clear that MK Ultra, not for us, but MK Ultra is usually associated with LSD. That's what the average person associates it with. They associate it with mind control through LSD. Then we get the promulgation of LSD as a cultural phenomenon, sort of escaping by design and forming the 60s counterculture, which is not by mistake. It's the LSD trials, begin with the CIA people and then the generals, and then it gets into Cary Grant, who did like 60 to 75 acid trips. Then Timothy Leary and Allen Ginsberg, they start talking about it as a new religion. Flower power gets coined by Allen Ginsberg, and we have all of this stuff from the 60s. But when most people are asked about acid and MK Ultra, people still cite the case of Frank Olson, and they still talk about it in the way that it's been designed to be talked about, which is with this kind of deniability built into it. So the way most people talk about it is they say, oh yeah, what about that one guy who OD'd on LSD and jumped out the window? But the book makes clear that that is not what happened. What happened was that, and that MK Ultra isn't even about that. What it's really about is a mind control and truth drug serum that will form a mind control Candy Jones type agent, and that will extract secrets from people, usually people in our own systems or our own, right? So in other words, it's not just about extracting secrets from captured enemy. It's actually about extracting secrets, and whether people have told secrets from their, let's say it's our side, if there's a side with this stuff. I know, you get what I'm saying, from the United States' own intelligence apparatus or from the government. And what you really learn from the book, or what you relearn, what's reinforced, is that you think that people in the government, like ambassadors or state senators, are safe from this sort of thing, but they are actually targets. They're actually targets worse than the average, the average unwitting person, and that's because the civilians, like the regular people, only get exposed to this sort of stuff en masse, like with Operation SeaSpray or something like that. It's only later, in the later stages of this, in the latter part of the 20th century and into the 21st century, where we're all victims through the way that technology has proliferated and the way that technology, propaganda, SSRIs, and all this stuff has come to sort of coalesce into this one mass of a huge panopticonic mind control program that's everywhere. Couple that with the release of the insane asylums and the Karanka and all this stuff, and now we're in it. But before that, civilians were safe from this sort of thing. But if you were a state senator, for example, and you went in complaining of a headache, you could walk into a place that was contracted through the Human Ecology Fund, which was a CIA cutout, and they would dose you with the very thing that you were trying to get free of, and then you were completely brain scrambled forever. This later happened in a finer point, in a sort of a laser-like focus with you and Cameron and various Estabrooks and these various doctors, but they were really, like, there's one guy in here, he's a state senator. and they capture him. He goes in for a doctor's appointment, and then they black bag him, take him off to a black site in the Panama Canal Zone, and then he is taken. I think he's taken to Camp Schuster in Germany, and then eventually he's released here. Sidney Gottlieb is always taking these research trips, especially to the Far East. And at one point, there's one of the guys that ends up suing later on is a guy who hangs out on the left bank in Paris. And because Gottlieb is one of these prima donnas who is interested in literature and art, but is on the intelligence side of things. We see this with Crowley all the time. He's hanging out in a left bank cafe in Paris, and his drink gets spiked with LSD. He ends up being captured and brain scrambled, and he's basically useless for the rest of his life. And he reported being spiked by a guy with a pronounced limp and a stammer who fit the description of what they later know as Gottlieb. I don't know if it's him or not, but the book sort of leads you to that sort of conclusion that if it wasn't him, then it was this type of stuff that was going on. And that the thing with Olson and MK Ultra was that Frank Olson wasn't just some guy. He was in Special Activities Division, and he was head of the bacteriological DUB program that was focused on Korea. So he was sent to Korea, and what happened, and Wormwood, the documentary, kind of makes this clear. When he goes to Korea, he sees all of he's in charge of a bunch of these programs, like dropping fleas and ticks and, weaponized insects on the population and on these battlefields. And then they would capture what they called undesirables and put their head in a box and then, see how long it take fleas to weaponized anthrax fleas to rip their face off, or all kinds of demonic devil shit. And he witnessed unwitting human experimentation and torture, and that he was so broken by this that when he came back and he went to Edgewood Arsenal and Fort Detrick and went to this party at Sidney Gottlieb's house, he was dosed with acid. And he immediately started freaking out, saying he didn't like it. And then they wanted to send him to a psychiatrist. Well, guess what psychiatrist they sent him to? The worst one in the world. They sent him to Harold Abramson, who is the absolute worst person in the world. And he's Gottlieb's guy. He ends up saying, this guy is going to spill the beans. So they say, hey, meet us at this hotel in New York. When they get to New York, he's upstairs in his apartment or in his hotel room, and he's still going the next day to go, and he intends on spilling the beans, and so he ends up defenestrating from this hotel room. And then years later, Seymour Hersh gets on the case, and he says that the family must be the most they must be the most dead-eyed family of all time. They accept the answers that the government has given them for 20 years. So they end up getting a settlement and an apology from President Ford. They get like a $700,000 settlement, but they have to sign off and say they won't sue the government. But Ford apologizes and says that yes, he was dosed, but it still also says that he jumped from the window. Well, then what happens is, I'm kind of cutting things short here or skipping ahead. What happens is Olson's sons, and this is kind of a paraphrased version, it's a loose version, so if I get details wrong, forgive me, but Olson's sons have heard from Sidney Gottlieb. Sidney Gottlieb told them that if they ever had questions about their dad, they could come and ask him. So they decided to take him up on it, and they go find him at his house in Northern Virginia, his yurt. And when they go to find him, he answers the door, and when he answers the door, he says, "I thought you were here to shoot me." And they say, "No, sorry, we're not. Sorry to scare you. We're not here to do that." But then one of the Olson Jr. kids realizes that this was the most diabolical person they'd ever met. That Gottlieb was so diabolical because he realized that he had already twisted it so that they were apologizing to him when they walked through the door of his house. He'd already surreptitiously made them apologize to him like he was the victim. And they start talking about, what happened. They question him on stuff, and he won't answer some things. But then Gottlieb, who is so diabolical, says, "Have you ever thought of therapy?" Can you imagine taking this guy up on therapy First of all, therapy, get out of here. But you're going to take him up on a spiritual retreat for therapy and go in at something this guy's recommended? Well, the last guy he recommended was Harold Abramson, who is a total ogre ghoul, who was the guy who was instrumental in the defenestration itself. So then when he passes away, one of the Olsen Juniors decides to have his dad disinterred. They dig him up, and they have a coroner look at him, and they find that something about there's no glass shards, there's no evidence of glass shards in his body, which leads them to believe that he didn't jump himself out the window, because I think you couldn't open the window. You had to be, the windows wouldn't open, I think that's what it is. But also that there was a serious contusion over his left eye. So then he says, the Olsen Jr. says, well, what does this indicate? And then he gets a contact from another guy who says, well, have you ever heard of the CIA's study of assassinations? And in the study of assassinations, it talks about, I'm sure you guys have read this. I read this when I went over, maybe in a member stream, I went over it with the Jesse Ventura book, which published the parts of the assassination manual in full of all things, right? That's what he talks about, the CIA's pink mist program of invisibility. Right. Well, they in the assassination manual, of course, it talks about methods of disposal and methods of assassination dealing with objects at hand, any heavy object, and a knock over the temple, and then, of course, defenestration and car crashes are useful. But it fits in line with the thing, and then he asks, who wrote this? And then the guy tells him, Gottlieb. So of course, and they can't prove it definitively, but I think that what's indicated here is that, of course, that he was defenestrated out the window to keep him silent. But think of how long it took to get to even that sort of a pseudo conclusion from this stuff. One of the most interesting parts of the book is in chapter 5 called Abolishing Consciousness, when we get to George Hunter White. George Hunter White is the character that when you hear that quote about where else could a red-blooded American lie, cheat, steal, kill, and R-word, all with the sanction of the United States government. We had a merry time and all that stuff. That's George Hunter White. So George Hunter White is this guy who is a totally bald, massive, as he's described by his wife, fat slob, who is a narcotics division, drug addict monster with deep sexual fetishes, who ends up being a contact to Sidney Gottlieb. And this is one of the most interesting parts to read about. This says, I'll just read you what it says here. Making the wrong friends in New York during the early 1950s led some people into psychic shock. They were brought to an apartment at 81 Bedford Street in Greenwich Village and given drinks laced with acid, man. As they careened through their hallucinogenic trips, CIA operatives monitored their reactions. These unfortunates were unwitting subjects in one of the first MK Ultra experiments. The man Sidney Gottlieb hired to direct this operation, George Hunter White, stands out even in the dazzling MK Ultra cast of obsessed chemists, cold-hearted spy masters, grim torturers, hypnotists, electroshockers, and Hotler doctors. He was a hard-charging narcotics detective who lived large in the twilight world of crime and drugs. When Gottlieb offered him a job running a CIA safe house where he would dose unsuspecting visitors with LSD and record the results, he jumped at the chance. He imagined that it would be another wild episode in his long series of undercover exploits. It was that and more. This is page 74 of this book. White stood 5 feet 7 inches, weighed over 200 pounds, and shaved his head. Writers have described him as fat and bull-like and a vastly obese slab of a man who looked like a, quote, an extremely menacing bowling ball. His first wife, who divorced him in 1945, called him a, quote, fat slob. This guy's perfect. He regularly used illegal drugs, keeping for himself a share of whatever he confiscated. His consumption of alcohol, often a full bottle of gin with dinner, was legendary. His other appetite was sexual fetish, especially esomasochism and high heels. It reminds me of Norm Macdonald's thing about he's gotten into the S&M life community. It's a small community. He says anybody who gets into that community really, they want to start off as an S, but unfortunately they make them start off with an M. So anyway, finally Norm, Norm was in the community, and he have to have a safe word. They call it a safe word. His safe word was boring. He bought his second wife a closet full of boots and patronized prostitutes who bound and whipped him. It's like when they whip the back of your balls. Or one of his few emotional bonds was with his pet canary. After several years as a crime reporter for the San Francisco Call Bulletin, I wonder if he was there. I wonder if he worked for this paper. Is this the same paper that LaVey worked for? That would be crazy. Because remember, LaVey. Did LaVey work for the paper or did he work for the police? He was a crime reporter. He was a photographer of crime scenes. Regardless, it would not surprise me to know that George Hunter White and LaVey knew each other. He made national headlines in 1937 by busting a Chinese-American opium ring, supposedly after being initiated into the gang and agreeing to death by fire if he ever betrayed its secrets. The men's magazine True lionized him in a stirring article headlining "When the Rookie Took the Tong." He cultivated his image and lost no chance to enhance it. Sometimes he invited reporters to accompany him on raids. This reminds me of what's happening right now with Dr. Phil and the ICE raids. Right? Without quitting the Narcotics Bureau, White joined the Office of Strategic Services when World War II broke out. Oh, listen to this. This is funny. It's not funny, but we have to laugh because it's so bad. He was sent for paramilitary training at a secret base in Ontario called Camp X. You guys know about this place, which he later called a school of murder and mayhem. Not a very good school to enroll your teen kids into, let me tell you. After completing the course, he became a trainer himself. Several of his trainees went on to long careers at the CIA, including Richard Helms, Frank Wisner, and Angleton. Later, he was posted to India, where he supposedly killed a Japanese spy with his own hands. He also helped direct OSS truth serum experiments in which prisoners were fed various drugs to test their value as aids to interrogation. Yeah, so Camp X is not a great place. That reminds me of the Hand of Death cult. In the Everglades, right, where good old boy Henry Lee Lucas was sent to, right, when he said he went to Camp X, or when he went to the Hand of Death cult, and W. Senior was there directing. That wouldn't surprise me. So anyway, so George Hunter White is, this guy is the perfect liaison between the underworld, law enforcement, and intelligence for setting up what becomes Operation Midnight Climax. And Operation Midnight Climax, everybody knows all about that, but this is where essentially he goes to San Francisco and sets up a brothel that is modeled, this is modeled on the mob's brothels and what Roy Cohn uses Roy Cohn learns this on the back east, right, from the mob, and transfers this to intelligence and to government people, especially when dealing with Jeff Stein McEffrey. So the Operation Midnight Climax place is essentially decked out like a brothel, and George Hunter White knows all these pimps and sex workers and drug dealers. He basically has them supply the place. The whole place is wired up. They say in the book that every single inch of the place is wired up with tape recording, with video recording, and that George Hunter White sits behind one of the mirrors with a portable toilet and club sandwiches, partaking in some of the illicit material that's there, material. He's sitting, and what's his name? Kinzer actually finds that in the accounting documents where he finds, lamps, light bulbs, red pantyhose, heroin, hashish, Demerol, morphine, China White, cocaine, and then finally a portable toilet on which he will sit and take notes. And then eventually, when the night's over and they've gotten all of their compromat, he says, "Come on over, fellas," and then they have a party, and then they just partake in all the stuff. I mean, it's just, this guy's a total devil. Yes, Chris, it is too much weirdness. It's too much weirdness. Eventually, they start getting into Manchurian candidate stuff, and this is the stuff with the Korean War, and with the Korean War, the guys who were captured by the Chinese and who are made to confess in show trials, and so the U.S. intelligence apparatus sees this and goes, "We need to try this," and eventually they settle on LSD mixed with other drugs as part of their mind control program, and this becomes the Manchurian program, that's where we get Manchurian Candidate from. And then when the movie comes out, that sort of opens up a can of worms for them, because now it's in the popular consciousness, but then they just use that to a different end. Then we get a bunch of other characters mixed in here. We get all the characters that you imagine that are associated with MKUltra, including George Estabrooks. Jose Delgado is mixed in here. George Estabrooks is the guy who claimed that he had this says, Americans took hypnosis seriously during the Cold War in 1950. A Colgate University psychiatrist, George Estabrooks, and Louis Jolly and West, asserted in the popular magazine Argosy that he had the ability to, quote, hypnotize a man without his knowledge or consent into committing treason against the United States. That attracted the CIA's attention. After MKUltra was launched, Estabrooks wrote a memo to the CIA saying he could create a hypnotic messenger who would be unable to betray a secret mission because he had no conscious knowledge of what that mission might be. And they say, perfect. You're just the guy we're looking for. In 1953, Morse Allen, who also believed fervently in the potential of hypnosis, ordered the production of a short film called The Black Art for showing to CIA employees. It depicts an American intelligence officer drugging and hypnotizing an Asian diplomat. In a trance, the diplomat enters his embassy, removes documents from a safe, and turns them over to his handler. The film ends with a persuasive voiceover. Could what you have just seen be accomplished without the individual's knowledge? Yes. Against an individual... Take two. Against an individual's will? Yes. How? Through the powers of suggestion and hypnosis. This contradicted what many scientists believed. During World War II, the OSS had consulted psychiatrists who studied hypnosis. This is page 87. One of them, Lawrence Kuby, who had worked with George Hunter White on truth serum experiments, such brilliant work, replied that he was skeptical that it will accomplish anything. Two others, Carl and William Menninger, who ran a highly regarded psychiatric clinic in Kansas, were even more emphatic. There's no evidence that supports post-hypnotic acts, especially when the individual's mores and morals produce the slightest conflict within him. A man to whom murder is repugnant and immoral cannot be made to override that personal taboo. I disagree, because, obviously we disagree, because they did this without even being mind-controlled. This is what the very doctors were doing. This is what the scientific priests were doing when they first started the thing. They were like, do no harm. Oh, I serve my country. Well, do incredible harm. Or we'll get a slice of the pie. Here's what they wanted. This is MKUltra. Gottlieb says one of his first ventures was MKUltra Subproject 5. Under which a researcher at the University of Minnesota, Alden Sears, conducted a carefully planned series of hypnosis experiments on about 100 subjects. Discretion was guaranteed since, as Gottlieb wrote in a memo, both Sears and his boss, the chairman of the psychiatry department, were cleared through top secret and are aware of the real purposes of the project. In the same memo, Gottlieb listed the areas he wanted Subproject 5 to investigate. Here they are. Hypnotically induced anxieties, hypnotically increasing the ability to learn and recall complex written matter. Polygraph response under hypnosis. Hypnotically increasing ability to observe and recall a complex arrangement of physical objects. Relationship of personality to susceptibility to hypnosis. Recall of hypnotically acquired information by very specific signals. This is programming. This is the programmed assassin. This is Jason Bourne stuff. Despite his avid interest in hypnosis and other possible paths to mind control, Gottlieb never strayed far from his conviction that the most likely path lay through psychoactive drugs. After launching his first hypnosis sub-project, he conceived the idea of another in which hypnotism, drugs, and sensory deprivation would be tested in combination. As his contractor, he enlisted, here we go, the worst guy, Dr. Louis Jolyon West, chairman of the psychology department at the University of Oklahoma. West was researching ways to create dissociative states in which the human mind could be pulled from its moorings. In his proposal to Gottlieb, he reported that experiments involving altered personality function as a result of environmental manipulation, chief sensory isolation, have yielded promising leads. The result was Subproject 43. The actions of a variety of new drugs which alter the state of psychological functioning. At least some of these tests were conducted in a unique laboratory with a special chamber in which all psychologically significant aspects of the environment can be controlled. In this setting, the various hypnotic, pharmacologic, and sensory environmental variables will be manipulated in a controlled fashion. The CIA paid $20,800 to build the lab and support West's research. And then we have MK Ultra Subproject 4, which is bringing magic to the CIA. The next chapter. Chapter 6 here deals with magicians and their ability to teach sleight of hand. And this is teaching agents how to drug and deceive people. We have, let's see. Let me skip forward here to page 96. Oh, yeah, listen to this. Later it turned out this is Isbell, Dr. Isbell. This is, let me find... Where can we find who this guy is? Page 93 talks about the official CIA manual of trickery and deception. Our interest was in sleight of hand practices and the art of surreptitious delivery or removal. Cutout companies. Subproject 19 involves the preparation of 2 additional sections to the manual, modified or different methods and techniques for use if the performer is a woman, and methods and techniques that can be used where 2 or more people can work in collaboration. And then let me find this Isbell character. Okay, let's see. All right, I'm just going to skip forward here. It turned out that one of Isbell's victims was William Henry Wall, a physician and former state senator from Georgia who'd become addicted to the painkiller Demerol after a dental procedure. In 1953, he was arrested on drug charges, convicted, and sentenced to a term at the Addiction Research Center. Bad place to be if you're in the 1950s. There, he became a subject in Isbell's LSD experiments. They left him mentally crippled for the rest of his life. He suffered from delusions, paranoia, panic attacks, and suicidal impulses, silly Billy impulses. A book that his son later wrote about this case is entitled From Healing to Hell. Jesus. The CIA's ill-conceived covert Cold War scheme to find a mind-control drug for use on hostile leaders had caught my father in its hateful web. One of Isbell's experiments may have been the most extreme in the history of LSD research. He wanted to test the effects of heavy doses over an extended period of time. He said, quote, I have 7 patients who've been taking the drug for 42 days, double, triple, and quadruple doses. The experiment continued for 77 days. What can happen to a man's mind if he's locked in a cell and force-fed overdoses of LSD every day for so long? It's the worst shit I ever had, recalled one subject in Isbell's experiments, a 19-year-old African-American drug addict named Eddie Flowers. Flowers suffered through hours of overwhelming hallucinations because he wanted the dose of heroin that Isbell offered as payment. If you wanted it in the vein, you got it in the vein. In other words, this is the part where they get to these guys who are locked up for drug offenses, and they're promised free heroin. And they get their heroin, but only after 77 days. First, they get re-addicted. Then they get 77 days of quadruple-dosed LSD, including with sensory deprivation, smell-proof rooms, hoods over the head, electroshock therapy, and rooms that move. Like, it's not just the light, it's not just the sensory deprivation and sense making it seem like the room moves, but they actually made the rooms move. Shorten the rooms, tighten the rooms, put them in boxes. And then they are basically made into they're made into total schizos. Epileptic seizure produced by chemicals, psychosis induced. One of these guys, by the way, as you well know, was Whitey Bulger. James Whitey Bulger was a Boston gangster who was later sentenced to life imprisonment for crimes including 11 muck-ducks. Bulger was a street-level thug in his mid-20s when he was sent to Atlanta Federal Penitentiary after being convicted of armed robbery and truck hijacking. There, he volunteered to participate in what he was told was a drug experiment aimed at finding a cure for schizophrenia. What followed is almost unimaginable. Along with 19 other inmates, he was given LSD nearly every day for 15 months without being told what it was. In a notebook he wrote after being released, he described nightly nightmares, horrible LSD experiences, followed by thoughts of S-side and deep depression that would push him over the edge. He did not tell medical attendants about hearing voices or the seeming movement of a calendar in cell, etc., for fear that if he did so, I'd be committed for life and never see the outside again. In one passage, he describes Pfeffer as a modern-day Mengele. It's a trenchant comparison since the experiments that Mengele and other Hotler doctors conducted at sea camps were lineal ancestors of MK Ultra sub-projects. Bulger said, I was in prison for committing a crime and feel they committed a worse crime on me. His description of his experience is a rare report on an MK Ultra experiment from the subject's perspective. Listen to this is what Bulger says. This is what Whitey Bulger says. And this is crazy because, if anybody who doesn't believe in, Phoenix program or programmed assassins and serial killers, then this is it. This is part of what created it. In 1957, while a prisoner at Atlanta Penn, I was recruited by Dr. Carl Pfeffer of Emory University to join a medical project that was researching a cure for schizophrenia. We would receive 3 days of good time for each month on the project. We were injected with massive doses of LSD-25. In minutes, the drug would take over, and it's to the vein. About 8 or 9 men, Dr. Pfeffer and several men in suits who were not doctors, would give us tests to see how we reacted. 8 convicts in a panic and paranoid state, total loss of appetite, hallucinating. The room would change shape, hours of paranoia and feeling violent. We experienced horrible periods of living nightmares and even blood coming out of the walls. Guys turning into skeletons in front of me. I saw a camera change into the head of a dog. I felt like I was going insane. The men in the suits would be in a room and hook me up to machines, asking questions like, did you ever kill anyone? Would you kill someone? 2 men went psychotic. They all had symptoms of schizophrenia. They had to be pried loose from under their beds, growling, barking, frothing at the mouth. They put them in a strip cell down the hall. I never saw or heard from them again. They told us we were helping to find a cure. When it was over, everyone would feel S-sidal and depressed, wrung out emotionally. Time would stand still. Dr. Pfeffer would appeal to me when I tried to quit. Please, you're my best subject. We're close to finding the cure. It's just absolute hell. And then we have Monarch with Harold Abramson is introduced. Harold Abramson is a total fucking demon. I'm not even going to go into him because he's awful. Kind of skipping ahead here because you get the point. Skipping ahead to about page 155, one thing that appeals to these guys is it says, on an autumn evening in Rome 2,000 years ago, Emperor Claudius ate a large meal that included a plate of his favorite mushrooms. Several hours later, he felt violently ill. He trembled, vomited, gasped for breath, and died before morning. 20th century scientists confirmed with what some Romans suspected. Claudius's wife, Agrippina, who wanted to place her son in power, had mixed poisonous mushrooms with the ones her husband liked to eat, and the story of her success tantalized the first crop of CIA officers. Let's get into the technology of assassinations, one urged in a memo. Figure out most effective ways to kill, like Empress Agrippina. So that's interesting because that comes up in my book of poems, Runes. Study. It's not a study. A book on megalomania in the Third Reich, Troubles era Northern Ireland, and Imperial Rome. And Agrippina is one of the major characters in that in terms of personae. But it's just interesting. It speaks to the old boy network as far as using ancient Roman history to induce and affect their study of mind control assassinations. Hey, look, there's Rachel. Shouts out to Rachel right there. Based Homeschool Mama, love you. Shouts out to everybody out there. Thank you, Rachel, for being here. Appreciate you. Thanks to Jason. Everybody out there, love you guys. Hope it's not too snowy up there. I mean, I'm sure it is because it's snowy right here. It's snowy as heck. I mean, it's like just a little bit of snow, but I'm already on early vacation because of it. The Svengali comes up on page 163, and this is basically Sidney Gottlieb's archetype for himself, which is the Svengali, or the gray man. Remember Norm Macdonald talking about the gray man, right? Very bad description of a man. That guy was a real jerk. But the gray man is essentially the CIA or any sort of intelligence operative who can walk in and out of a place and look so ordinary that nobody recognizes him. And I had a serious girlfriend years ago when I was in England whose father worked for GCHQ, and it was weird because at the time, that's the way that she always described him. That's the way that people always described him, was that he was a kind of a, just an average-looking, slightly overweight, average-height guy who always literally wore gray, and he was a spy. And the reason for that was because that is the ultimate spy, especially in terms of auditory spying, a guy who has to go into one of the GCHQ listening facilities, but has to make his way through the rest of the world, and so he just can't be noticed. He's just an average-looking guy who's going to work. But that's the way that Sidney Gottlieb is described, and Sidney Gottlieb was on effective missions and was given a license to KILL by CIA, especially involving people like Castro and Lumumba. In fact, the assassination of Patrice Lumumba is interesting because Lumumba, remember, in Congo was, who was involved with this? Was it Stuart Copeland's dad was part of that? I think he was. Right, the Grand Chessboard. These people, basically, CIA wanted Lumumba gone, and they tasked Gottlieb with coming up with a poison pen, a poison dart, a heart attack gun, something that would mimic a natural process that would be undetectable. And they actually got Gottlieb to come up with the poison, and he had to physically courier it all the way to Congo. But what happened was, by the time he got there, they had already captured him because of the, what would you call that? The Frank Kitson gangs and counter gangs, other aspect of Special Activities Division. Miles Copeland, thank you, Sabrina. Which was that Frank Kitson was the guy who died last year, who was the brigadier who wrote Low Intensity Operations and Gangs and Counter Gangs. He's the guy that formed the kind of 20th century idea of co-opting criminals and street gangs to be a third party with deniability for CIA hit squads. And so he did this with the Mau Mau's in Kenya, and he did it in the war in Malaya in 1960, and then again in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. He did this with the Force Reconnaissance Unit, and that was tasked with being a death squad, eliminating IRA contacts outside of the SAS. And so this seems to be the template for what happened with Lumumba in Congo, and then eventually they captured him and killed him, so that it became a moot point as far as the poison was concerned. But it was still on record as happening. Another literary provenance for this is Poe, Edgar Allan Poe, whom I've covered, in depth and numerous times. But mind control, mesmerism, hypnotism. Remember, in Bram Stoker's Dracula, and in the Francis Ford Coppola movie, right, where these things were especially popular in the 19th century, and Poe kind of helped foment this, and this especially comes out in 1845 with his publication of The Facts in the Case of M. Valdemar, which is a story about, this is on page 164, I've covered this, a story about mesmerism written as if it were a report of a true case. In it, a dying patient is placed into a trance and remains suspended for 7 months, alive but without a pulse or heartbeat. The story caused a sensation. Poe finally admitted it was a hoax, but it struck a deep emotional chord. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, How Do I Love Thee, Let Me Count the Ways, wrote that Poe had made a horrible improbability seem near and familiar. And then Ambrose Bierce, whom I've also covered, is that I covered one of his short stories, was also drawn to the idea of mind control in his 1890 story, The Realm of the Unreal. A magician from Calcutta hypnotizes an entire audience in Baltimore. He claims to have discovered a method by which a peculiarly susceptible subject may be kept in the realm of the unreal for weeks, months, and even years, dominated by whatever delusions and hallucinations the operator may from time to time suggest. This may seem outlandish, but it is. Noticing intensifies. Thanks for that $2. Thanks for that $2, buddy. Really appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. I'll come back to the super chats too and the sponsored streams. This may seem outlandish and totally unreal, but this is why this is the realm of the unreal, because literature, of all things, literature and drama usually push the realm of truth into, even though things aren't factual, they are truthful, and they end up being mimicked in real life and happening. And this is why intelligence is so tied in with the literary world and with the dramatic world, especially in the mid 20th century. This happens over and over again. We see this now with the movie world and with Hollywood, but there's such a crossover between illusion and the world of espionage and intelligence. Of course, guess what's quoted in the book? Of course, Macbeth is quoted. This is pages 166 and 167 because we're talking about substances and witch's brew. Let's see. Creatures who act at the command of others appear regularly in science fiction. They talks about Dracula and Frankenstein. Of course, Frankenstein and Dr. Frankenstein are the same, and that's just a Lewis Jolyon West type of dissociation. This is what Gottlieb and his MK Ultra comrades wanted to learn how to do. Exaggerated fears based on true events led them to believe that the human psyche can be controlled from the outside. The stories they imbibed as children and adults made those fears seem real. Lost in the blurry borderland between the fantasy and truth of mind control, they could not bring themselves to recognize the fantasy as a product of creative imagination. What the imagination could conceive, they believed the clandestine world could make real. There you go. MK Ultra was an attempt to invent a new reality. This is from Macbeth. When Banquo and Macbeth meet the three prophetic witches, the Weird Sisters, the Fate Sisters, at the opening of Shakespeare's play, they wonder, have we eaten on the insane root that takes men prisoner? MK Ultra was no more or less than a search for that insane root. Look, our partner's wrapped with all. This is a part in Act 1 of Macbeth where Banquo and Macbeth first come upon the Weird Sisters, and Macbeth's his opening line is, "So fair and foul a day I have not seen," which mirrors the Weird Sisters opening of the play, which is foul is fair and fair is foul. Foul is fair and fair is foul. Foul is fair and fair is foul. Hover through the fog and filthy. Is it the opposite? Fair is foul and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy air. It's an inversion. It's trochaic, but it's an inversion of what Macbeth later says is his opening line. And Macbeth meets the Weird Sisters and immediately goes into believing what these what this witches coven is saying to him, probably because they are part of a unit that is functioning as a third party for Lady Macbeth, who later drugs the guards and assists in the assassination of Banquo, and then goes crazy herself with guilt. But the point is that the insane root that he mentions is either poppy or mandragora. Mandragora, which, needless to say, with the later scene with the witches that everybody knows, double, toil and trouble, fire, burning, cauldron, bubble, right, when they, introduce all the elements into the witch's brew, and Macbeth sees his visions, he dissociates and sees his visions. When the lines stretch out to the crack of doom, he sees his own eventual end. It is a kind of programmed assassin, although he seems to be programmed for Satan and for himself, until he ends up with his own head on a pike. But this appeals to intelligence because of the mind control elements of under the surreptitious disguise and banner of working for their country. Although the book also shows you that they have no kind of national allegiances. The red tide on page 172 is ironic because there's a red tide mentioned with the U-2 spy program, and this ends up being this saxitoxin, which is a red mist, a kind of red mist. The red mist is mentioned all throughout literature that I've covered, as everybody from Bateman to Macbeth sees a kind of red mist, seeing the world cloaked in blood and a curtain and a shower of blood. And this is one of the programs that they induce. And it's interesting that the red mist and the red tide ends up being a tide of blood rather than the communist tide. The program, remember the program Acoustic Kitty? That's one of the best names that they come up with in terms of their weird verbiage, which is all throughout Don DeLeo as well, and through the analysis that I did of the Full Spectrum Dominance and Drone Warfare book. All Project Igloo White. These have dark lyrical names, almost Ted Hughesian. And Acoustic Kitty is, let me see. Acoustic Kitty was conceived as the CIA's answer to a nagging surveillance problem. Bugging devices that its officers placed in foreign embassies often picked up too much background noise. Someone, a case officer or a tech from Gottlieb's shop, observed that cat ears, like human ears, contain a cochlea, a natural filter that screens out much of that noise. Why not try to turn a living cat into a surveillance device? Even if it proved unable to filter out background noise, it would allow audio access to targets who allowed cats to wander through their offices or conference rooms. This idea led to many months of experimentation and ultimately the creation of Acoustic Kitty, a CIA-contracted operating theater. The cat was a miracle of technology. After the operation, she showed no outward scars, walked normally, and could do everything other cats did. They basically kidnapped the cat, cut into its brain, put a chip in its brain, and then it functions as an acoustic device spying. Finally, CIA handlers brought her to the park for a test mission. They pointed her in the direction of two men lost in conversation, supposedly with this command: listen to those two guys. Don't listen to anything else. Not the birds, no cat or dog, just two guys. Any cat owner could guess what happened next. The cat took a few steps toward the men and then wandered off in another direction. But technically, the audio system worked, generating a viable audio signal. And Acoustic Kitty turns into the all-encompassing surveillance that terrorizes the TI. Guess what? Pages 210 and 211, USAID is mentioning as being a cutout, a total CIA cutout, along with all of the other these other agencies that they finally questioned Gottlieb. Gottlieb is finally questioned by the government and made to spill some beans, and he hands over some places where CIA has infiltrated, including DOD, FBI, State Department, Postal Service, Secret Service, USAID, White House, police representing Washington, Arlington, Fairfax, and Alexandria. The next couple of chapters, Colby is mentioned. Remember Colby is the one who succeeds Richard Helms. Richard Helms was a true MK Ultra warrior. He was a true cold warrior, and was the one who was tasked with destroying the MK Ultra documents at the end. But the one who comes after him is Colby. Colby was the one who was in charge of Phoenix program, and Colby and Schlesinger basically are tasked with reforming CIA and exposing some of the parts of MK Ultra because of reform. Helms had gone off to work for the Shah of Iran, but Colby exposes a bunch of the secrets. Remember, that's why Colby works with Doug Valentine for the Phoenix program book and ends up being unalived, I think, being unalived on his canoe trip in the Potomac River, just like the scene with John Voight in the Manchurian Candidate film. George Hunter White, again, is the guy who makes the statements about where else could a person, a red-blooded American boy lie, cheat, steal, kill, R-word, and pillage with the sanction of and blessing of the All-Highest. It was fun, he says. John Marks gets, this is chapter 50, I'm skipping ahead here. John Marks gets 16,000 pages of documents from a FOIA request and works with Victor Marchetti. They find out Sidney Gottlieb is the most probable author of the study of assassination in 1953. Hamlet is quoted on page 253 of this book. Let's see. Yeah, foul deeds will rise, though all the earth are overwhelmed into men's eyes. And then, let's see. Gottlieb was brought in for trial, but he won a postponement in the first weeks of 1999 as he waited for trial to begin. Detectives in New York began a new push to reopen the Frank Olson investigation. No peace lay ahead. He was never going to be tried for it. But the book quotes Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach, another literary analogy here, mixed to sort of illustrate some of the problems of that these guys were having and what came to pass. The world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy nor love nor light, nor certitude nor peace, nor help from pain. And here we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. Sidney and Margaret Gottlieb, Sidney Gottlieb retires from CIA and then none of his neighbors know that's what he did, and he ends up like doing all this stuff in community work. He like goes to work for an elementary school. He tries to work with speech therapy as if he's got some great weight lying on him, but actually, this is what I said at the beginning. This is the problem with the spiritual. The spiritual ends up as the modus operandi of the totally insane psychotic ghoul who wants to spiritually possess his victims. And I think the grand motif of this entire book, which is a great book, I really recommend it, Poisoner in Chief, Stephen Kinzer. The grand motif of the entire book is essentially that the legitimate people that found their way into MK Ultra always end up reversing the very thing that they were working towards. It's just like with some of the agencies and bureaus that are under fire right now. Oh, but how will people be able to live without their funding? Well, their whole point is to do the opposite. They're not helping anybody. It's like if country X needs medical treatment for this, disease Z, it seems that the people are going to come in and they're going to offer assistance with that, and they're going to fund eradication of disease Z, but actually they're just bringing in disease Z. Does that make sense? To study the effects or to accelerate Depop or whatever the case may be. But it's the same every time with Sidney Gottlieb, and he ends up not being prosecuted because, he can't go on trial because he is sensitive to television and studio lights. Well, how do you think the people felt when they were dosed with LSD for 700 days with electroshock therapy with their head in a box with a Ewan Cameron audio recording strapped to their ears saying, kill, 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 and sensory deprivation strobe lights implanted on the inside of their rods and cones? That's it. That's right. They had come and hacked off every inoculated arm, and there they were, just a pile of little arms. And I remember thinking, my God, the genius of that, the will to do that. Perfect, crystalline, complete, pure. If I had 10 divisions of those men, this war would be over very quickly. You have to have men who are moral, horror, fear, and moral terror are your friends. They are your friends. If they are not, then they are enemies. They are truly enemies to be feared. Do you live near the river? The Ohio River, sir? Uh-huh. But look here, it is Caesar's will. Common parks to walk abroad and recreate yourselves. Let's slip the dogs of war. All right, so thank you to everybody for being here. Let's look at some super chats and some support we may have gotten here. Let's check it out. Let's check it out, people. Hey, thank you so much. Hey, JW Cool Stream, $20. Thank you so much. Rachel gifted 10 memberships. Thank you so much, Rachel. Love you so much. Thank you so much. That is awesome. There's our boy Port, who drops 2 Australian. Thank you so much. Noticing intensifies. Thank you so much. Let's check out and see if we got any other support here. I had some anonymous support. Fellow wishes me not to notice him, even though we are noticers. So thank you, sir, I will say. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for that $20. Really appreciate that earlier. Thank you so much. Hey. Let's see. Let me see if this next one says, let's see. That's Aaron drops $15 and says, thanks for covering this important book on MK Ultra. Gottlieb did some dirty stuff, some dirty stuff. Not far from where I grew up. Early life section for him, not needed. Exactly. Here's some gas money for your trip. Blessed Lent. Hey, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Thank you for supporting me on my trip I'm about to go on. Thank you so much, buddy. Really appreciate that. Longtime supporter. Thank you to Real John Connor, who drops $5 for it. Did you see the size of that chicken? Did you see the size of that cock-a-doodle-doo? We're in the spirit world, asshole. Thank you so much, Real John Connor. Hey, Ethan drops $10 for the fire. Thank you so much, Ethan. Really appreciate you. I gave you a shout out earlier, too, for that last super chat. Thank you so much. That is so kind of you. Thank you so much to Brendan for that $100 sponsored stream super chat. Really appreciate you. Thanks for the ideas. I will get to that. And let's see. Thanks to Jason for that $8 PayPal. Really appreciate you. Thanks so much, buddy. You are the best. If I've forgotten anybody, please forgive me. I'm trying to look through here and see if there's anybody else that I missed. Yo, Jason drops me $10 on PayPal. Thank you so much, Jason. You are the man. You are truly the man, and I really appreciate you. You want to wait around here for 6 hours? Charlie, don't surf. Common pox for you to walk abroad and recreate yourselves. Hold on. Let me look this up real quick. I know the whole thing by heart, but if I'm put on the spot right now. Mark Anthony, Act 3, Scene 2. Hell yeah, let's go, baby. When comes such another? Mark Anthony's funeral oration. With Caesar dead. Poor dumb mouths. He says, there's not a nobler man in Rome. But yesterday the word of Caesar might have stood against the world. Now lies he here, and none so poor do him reverence. O masters, if I were disposed to stir your hearts and minds to mutiny and rage, I should do Brutus wrong, I should do Cassius wrong, who you all know are honorable men. You do realize that, hey, thanks Sabrina for that $10. Appreciate you, the Lathe of Heaven. Thank you so much, Sabrina. Really appreciate that $10 super chat. Thank you so much. That Caesar he really does act like Trump in a number of ways, especially with do not tell them that I don't want to go, tell them that it is my will, tell them I will not go, right? But I am constant as the northern star, of whose true fixed and resting quality there is no fellow in the firmament. So in the world, the way that he carries himself in the play is very much like that, is what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that in terms of, I'm just saying that's just an objective analysis of looking at the play. I don't know why I'm talking about Caesar. Oh, because of the epigraph. Because the epigraph from Stephen Kinzer. Bequeathing it as a rich legacy unto the issue. It is not meet, you know, how Caesar loved you. You are not wood, you are not stones, but men. And being men, hearing the will of Caesar, it will inflame you. It will make you mad. 'Tis good, you know, not that you are his heirs. If you have tears, prepare to shed them now. You all do know this mantle. I remember the first time ever Caesar put it on. 'Twas on a summer's evening in his tent. That day he overcame the Nervii. Look, in this place ran Cassius' dagger through. See what a rent the envious Casca made. Through this the well-beloved Brutus stabbed, and as he plucked his cursed steel away, mark how the blood of Caesar followed it, as rushing out of doors to be resolved if Brutus so unkindly knocked or no, for Brutus, as you know, was Caesar's angel. Judge, O you gods, how dearly Caesar loved him. This was the most unkindest cut of all, for when the noble Caesar saw him stab, ingratitude, more strong than traitor's arms, quite vanquished him, then burst his mighty heart, and in his mantle muffling up his face, even at the base of Pompey's statue, which all the while ran blood, great Caesar fell. Oh, what a fall was there, my countrymen! Then you and I and you and all of us fell down, whilst bloody treason flourished over us. Oh, now you weep, and I perceive you feel the dint of pity. These are gracious drops. The dint of pity. Feeling the dint of pity. Yeah. It's mirrored because of the beginning of the play, because the plebs are out there and they're talking about how, oh, Pompey was here and you ran with your infants in your arms, and where are you now? Right now you were... The whole play is supposed to indicate that the will of the mob is fickle. Right, but also that oh, there goes a cigarette. There goes a cigarette right out of my mouth. Damn. It's supposed to indicate that one thing that you get from watching, especially now in a postmodern viewing of or reading of Julius Caesar, is that Cassius clearly wants to perpetuate the oligarchy, and they don't like this disruptor that Caesar is, who has called a halt to the Civil War. He has won the Civil War between their guy Pompey and himself, right? And Caesar has taken over for peace, but they're going to use a kind of precog to get rid of him for what he could have done. But this is all just to placate the mob and to induce the naive Brutus into murdering this guy. And it ends up that blood will have blood, they say, as Macbeth says, and this produces more bloodshed, because just like with Sidney Gottlieb and the MK Ultra people, when you destroy an innocent human in the name of protection from the marauding horde, you are the marauding horde, and you are destroying the innocence of your American people, just like you are claiming to do the opposite. But exactly, Chris. Ain't nothing, don't never change. Wise words indeed. Okay, you guys, that's about it, I think. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for supporting me. Really appreciate you guys, as always. Please make sure that you, if you want to, this is a great book. Poisoner in Chief, Stephen Kinzer, Sidney Gottlieb, and the CIA Search for Mind Control. And again, this wasn't part of our normal but the reason I did this, just to reiterate, is because mind control, dissociation, most dangerous game plays such a role in a paradigmatic look at literature. We constantly look at this like this is the lens through which we look at literature much of the time. Most dangerous game, Gnosticism, mind control, DID, that all these sort of things coalesce, but it's important to go back and look at the actual source material, just like we look at the source material for literature itself. So I think that is something that behooves us to always go back and refresh ourselves with some of these books, especially with new books that tend to come out. So coming up, by the way, check out, if you're a new member from tonight, check out the Apocalypto stream that I did today. I did a Based Mel analysis of Apocalypto, his great underrated 2006 classic. And coming up, I'll be doing Martin Amos's The Zone of Interest, which was one of the best movies of last year, by Jonathan Glazer. He's one of these people from London. Jonathan Glazer, silly Billy. So I'll be doing the actual book. I discovered Martin Amos when I was doing the analysis of J.G. Ballard. I just never paid attention to him before, but so I got the book, so I'll be doing that one. Also, a bunch of other stuff coming up. I'll be going on vacation soon, but hopefully I'll be doing a bunch of streams before that because I've got a little bit of time. And love everybody out there. Thank you. Hope everybody stays safe on the wet roads, the icy roads, or the dry roads, wherever you are. Everybody out there stay safe. And listen, is it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it if you're strong enough. Okay? I love y'all. Peace. Have a great night. Have a great February. It's the year of love. You can support me at any time in the links provided on the channel description, video descriptions. You can super chat me anytime. You can send me support. You can email me at madmaximalism with 2 X's at gmail.com. Give me ideas, whatever you want. Just reach out. Anything you've written. Shouts out to all of our friends and family out there. Shouts out to Rachel and the Wilsons. Shouts out to everybody out there. Thank you so much. And here is Rooks G, who's going to play us out with a hit off his new album. What does that mean, play us out? To play us out. Go, go. All right, go. And that'll do it here to us tonight. Can't do it. Can't do it. We do it live. Fucking thing sucks. Here's Rooks G and a cut off his new album. Love y'all. Keep living. LIVIN. Peace. Altered Self. Rooks G. Cheers to y'all. Peace.